The courtroom was cold, as usual. It always felt this way in places where not justice but uncertainty reigned. The cold air froze not just bodies, but consciences too. When Camille Rhodes entered the courthouse that morning, the gray paint on the walls was peeling, and the rusty radiators clattered weakly with a faint resistance. There was no hum inside, only the echo of heels on the floor. It was as if everyone was afraid to speak, yet they wanted to make their silence heard loudly. Camille's shoes weren't polished like the other lawyers. Her dress wasn't designer. She hadn't exaggerated her hair. She was carrying a black file with slightly frayed edges. To those who saw her, she looked like just another public defender. That's what they expected, a quiet, unassuming black woman. What could possibly come from this? But inside that file, there was the seed of a truth that would shake the courtroom, perhaps even the entire judicial system. When Camille stepped into the courtroom, time seemed to stop. The American flag hung motionless behind the judge's bench, but the light breaking through cast a flickering shadow on the wall. It wasn't the flag that was trembling, but justice itself. Camille slowly moved from the back row to the front of the defense side. She placed her file on the table. She lowered her gaze, but her movements were flawless. There was neither haste nor unnecessary arrogance. Just as she should be in a courtroom, invisible yet striking. The other lawyers glanced at her as they passed. A young officer carrying his file smiled slightly and said sarcastically, "Good luck, Ms. Rhodes." Camille didn't respond. The man standing in the corner was Deshaun Miller, black in his mid-20s, his eyes shifting between anxiety and anger. His hands were clasped tightly on his knees as if holding on to his own body. The charge against him, armed robbery. Evidence, a witness in a blurry camera recording. The strange thing was, all this evidence seemed too neat. Everything had been prepared just in time, just as was expected in this courtroom. When the door to the courtroom opened, everyone stood up. The judge was coming, Judge Walter Whitaker. White in his late 60s, his wrinkles deepened with arrogance, his eyes glowing with a sinister intelligence. He walked slowly, arms folded behind his back. He glanced at Camille. He smiled. But it wasn't a smile, it was an imitation of contempt. "Ms. Rhodes, I assume you're the public defender. I hope you haven't given your client too much hope," he said. His voice spread throughout the room, echoing like a mocking reverberation. Camille raised her head. She looked directly into the judge's eyes. 2 seconds. 3. A silent challenge. "I'm here to ensure that justice is served, Your Honor," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet tension in her tone. The judge shifted slightly. He felt something, but he chose to suppress it. The prosecutor, accompanied by a young attorney, began. He presented the camera footage. The image was blurry, but the jacket silhouette appeared similar to the one Deshaun wore that day. Then the witness took the stand, a middle-aged man. Through his glasses, he spoke with clarity. "Yes, it was that kid, I'm sure." Camille said nothing. She didn't object. She simply took a few notes in her notebook. Her hands didn't even tremble. This silence comforted some. Perhaps it was a weak defense. Perhaps Camille was afraid. Or perhaps... Camille stood up. She took a deep breath. A silence descended on the room. "Your Honor," she said, pulling out a black leather ID holder from her coat pocket, "the prosecutor in this case has been removed. I now hold the authority to present evidence and proceed with the case." A murmur spread through the room. The judge frowned, rising in anger. "What nonsense are you speaking?" Camille placed the ID in front of him. Then from the inner pocket of her coat, she pulled out a shiny, unquestionable badge from the Federal Department of Justice. A badge that radiated power. "I am Camille Rhodes, Federal Special Prosecutor. My appointment to this case has been effective as of this morning." The color drained from Judge Whitaker's face. Then his forehead turned bright red. He pressed his palms against the bench. "This court is under my jurisdiction," he shouted. Camille stood tall. She spoke without averting her gaze. "And wherever justice is violated, Your Honor, it is my responsibility." This moment would be etched in everyone's mind, because a woman's voice wasn't just speaking through her words, but through her history. And Camille Rhodes's history was not as silent as they thought. As Camille Rhodes adjusted her eyes to the dim lighting of the courtroom, every sound felt heavy. The excitement she'd felt on her first day as a prosecutor was long gone. What she felt now was nothing but a determination to pursue justice. She had doubts about Deshaun Miller's innocence, but how deep could she dig? Everything that had happened seemed too perfectly orchestrated. The evidence presented by the prosecution appeared strong at first glance, but Camille noticed things that others missed. The oddities in the witness's testimony, the blurriness of the camera footage, and most notably, how could the witness alone have had the courage to take the fall for someone else? The witness recalled everything about how the crime was committed, but when it came to the details of the moment they witnessed, their memory seemed notably weak. As Camille began to investigate the evidence, her suspicions only grew stronger. One night she reviewed the video footage. She watched so closely that her eyes started to strain. The time discrepancies between the recordings, the angles, and the lighting flaws all pointed to one thing. This was a game. Everything was just a half-truth. Camille closed the file and took a deep breath. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a fighter, determined to undo this injustice. The next day, Camille began researching the witness's past. His name was Kyle Jenkins, and he had close ties to the police. Using every resource she had, Camille dug into Jenkins' shady past. Every clue pointing to contradictions in his testimony only deepened Camille's suspicions. The investigation became more complex by the day. Camille uncovered missing files from the police department, altered times, and suspicious banking transactions that indicated witnesses had been pressured. As Camille scrutinized each new document, she realized she was holding a file that could uncover a major conspiracy. One afternoon, Camille examined the witness's banking records. The witness had failed to record several payments from the police. These payments left a clear trail showing that the witness had been paid to confirm an event. Discovering this piece of evidence made the case even bigger. It now seemed that the witness had been secretly guided by the police, strengthening the case Camille was building. After days of research and court sessions, Camille felt a deep fatigue weighing on her. Every night she wrestled with her own identity. In law school, she had often been excluded because of her race, belittled by male colleagues. Her successes were never seen as an opportunity, but as a constant test. These experiences had shaped her, and now she had a strategy for overcoming any challenge. Work twice as hard, win twice as much, fight twice as much. Despite all the hardships, Camille knew she had to leave the wounds of the past behind. Deshaun Miller's case was not just a defense fight, it was an opportunity to restore justice. A voice inside her whispered that it was time to make peace with the truth. Don't back down when you speak the truth, Camille. Decide which courage will take you further. One morning, Camille took a deep breath. This case wasn't just about Deshaun. It was a battle for the whole system. Yes, Camille was a black woman. Yes, the people around her had underestimated her. But she knew who she was. She was the representative of justice, and she would do whatever it took to shed light on the truth. Back in court, Camille decided it was time to present her evidence. The contradictions in the witness's testimony, the abnormalities in the video footage, the manipulations in the police department, all of it was in her hands. The prosecutor, having not seen this evidence, sat in stunned silence. Camille wasn't just solving the physical evidence, she was unraveling the souls of the people involved. Your Honor, Camille said, her eyes locked firmly on the judge. Today we're not only revealing the innocence of one man, we're exposing the rot of a system. Deshaun Miller has been wrongfully accused. This is just the final link in a game that's been going on for years. Judge Whitaker froze, his face turning red. The prosecutor started to leave, but every word Camille spoke showed her power. Every new document weighed heavier in the courtroom. Camille continued to trace the corruption in the police department. Which officers had been involved in suspicious cases? Who had made secret deals? Which witnesses had been bought? Camille had answers to every question. The temperature in the room rose suddenly. The judge, now unable to stand before the prosecutor, felt desperate. "This is the collapse of justice," the judge shouted. Camille's response was calm but impactful. "No, Your Honor, this is the time for reckoning." And that reckoning echoed throughout the entire courtroom. The media was following every moment of the case. Camille had become more than just a prosecutor. She had become a symbol of the people's struggle. Her photos as a defender of justice began circulating on social media. As the public silently became a part of this fight, they witnessed a woman's battle for justice. The courtroom felt like a volcano about to erupt. Camille focused her gaze patiently on Judge Whitaker's furrowed brow, turning his arrogance and power into internal anxiety. After the presentation of the evidence and testimonies, there was nothing more to be done. The ground beneath Judge Whitaker was decayed and shaking, but from the outside, everything still seemed normal. He appeared ineffective, defenseless, no longer as commanding as he once was. "Your Honor," Camille's voice sharpened, cutting through the tension. "This is not just a trial. This is a moment where the system itself must face accountability. A moment when justice is lost, consciences are silent, and the system is rotting. I am here today not only for my client, Deshaun Miller, but to defend all of our collective conscience. None of us has the luxury of turning a blind eye any longer." Her words intoxicated the courtroom with a silence so heavy it felt like a forest closing in. Judge Whitaker could not carry the weight of each word. He felt an emotional void. For so long, he had positioned himself as a righteous man, but Camille's words now echoed in his head like the striking of a hammer. In that moment, Whitaker felt the mask in his eyes break. He knew Camille was right. Whitaker continued his self-defense, shouting, "This case is under my authority." But his voice trembled. His hands slammed on the bench. But Camille, unwavering, stood firm against him. Her determination crushed him like an avalanche. The atmosphere in the courtroom became even more intense. Camille pulled her federal prosecutor badge from her jacket pocket, heightening the tension in the room. The entire process had begun to question the power of Judge Whitaker and all the corrupt figures in his system. Everyone was wondering what Camille would do next. Whitaker stood up, trying once again to defend himself, adding more pressure to the already tense room. "This is a denial of state justice," Whitaker said, trying to control his anger. Camille tilted her head slightly. Her voice was not one of rage, but of determination. "Your Honor, defending the state's justice is not just a symbol. It is a way of life, a matter of belief. It is a journey each person must confront with their own conscience. And people like you are the biggest obstacle to that journey." Whitaker's collapse had truly begun here. Camille's calm demeanor shattered his confidence. His hands trembled on the bench, his face reddened. When he saw Camille's badge and identity, he had no choice but to face the truth. She wasn't just a legal figure, she was one of the dirtiest players in the games of the past years. Accepting this was deeply painful for him. Then Camille began placing each piece of evidence she had gathered onto the table. Every witness statement, every bank record, every concealed file, they all shifted the atmosphere with incredible speed. With each document being laid out, Judge Whitaker shrank more and more. Like a dark shadow, all the dirty secrets of his past began to rise to the surface with every passing second. Judge Whitaker, struggling to cope with the files on the table, could no longer be saved. Camille, drawing all eyes in the room, was gradually revealing the truth with each piece of evidence. Perhaps Whitaker had once been seen as a powerful man, but Camille's statements revealed how the system had completely failed. The judge withdrew, clutching his hands over his face in utter collapse. "This is just a setup," he shouted, but his voice was weak, like a child's powerless rebellion. All eyes were on Camille. "This is not a setup, Your Honor. This is a reckoning. And the time for reckoning starts here, as it always does. Truths, like a quiet child, have the power to change the world. They never vanish." Media representatives were recording every moment, and each of Camille's words carried shocking significance. With the submission of documents concerning the judge's son's internal disciplinary inquiry, Whitaker's downfall was complete. The entire courtroom watched as this great collapse unfolded. Whitaker's eyes were lost, his face pale and red, now appearing more like a victim than a perpetrator. After the trial, Camille shared a brief moment with Deshaun Miller. He had been freed, but his acquittal was symbolic. This case had always been about more than just one man's redemption. It was about a society's fight against corrupt systems. Camille turned to Deshaun, smiling, and said, "Justice has been served." This was not only a turning point in Deshaun's life, but also a wake-up call for the conscience of society. On social media, comments about Camille's dedication to justice and truth began flooding in. People started to realize that Camille wasn't a hero, but simply a person who stood behind the truth. Her name had become a symbol of hope, rising above the system. As Camille exited the courtroom, her thoughts were complex and deep. Over the years, she had come to understand how fragile and difficult justice could be. But today, everything had changed. When people rise up, change is inevitable. As she walked out of the courtroom, the crowd around her bowed their heads in respect. Camille took a deep breath and, before leaving, turned to look back one last time. With a loud voice, she said, "Justice is not just a goal, it is a companion found on a journey. For those who have not strayed from the path, it is always there." What we won today was not just a case, but a society's fight. Truths are always found, always come to light at the right time. But this is not the end of the journey, it is just the beginning. And in that moment, Camille Rhodes was remembered not just as a prosecutor, but as a leader of society, a symbol of justice.